Welcome to show number 265 of the Arc Junkies Podcast, the show where we explore the fascinating world of welding and fabrication. I'm your host, Jason Becker, and I'm thrilled to have two special guests with me in studio today, Kuiper and Bryson Ward from ReadyArc, a leading provider of welding equipment, rental, and lease services. In this episode, we dive into Lori's incredible welding journey. She started out as a Millwright apprentice and worked her way up to becoming a welding engineer, and then played a critical role in developing Miller's RMD software. We'll hear about her experiences, challenges, and the triumphs in the welding industry. But before we get into it, I want to take a moment to thank our supporters for making this podcast possible. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring you these fascinating conversations with the top experts in the welding world. Today's episode of the Arc Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Outlaw Leather. Are you tired of using flimsy, mass-produced gear that just falls apart after a few months of use? Then check out my buddies over at Outlaw Leather. Their custom leather welding hoods, bolt bags, rod pouches, and more are handcrafted with the highest quality materials to ensure they withstand the test of time. Heck, I'm using my same hood from 2016 from Outlaw Leather. At Outlaw Leather, they understand that your gear is your livelihood, and they want to provide you with the best possible tools to do your job. Each and every piece they make is handcrafted with pride, and they even do custom leather work. Just send over your description to info@outlawleatherllc.com to place an order. And the best part, with their storefront location in Pasadena, Texas, you can even stop by and see their products in person. Not only will you be able to check the quality of their products firsthand, but you'll be able to talk to their experts who can help you find the right gear for you. But even if you can't make it to the store, you can still take advantage of their special offer just for listeners of the Arc Junkies show. Use code word ARCJunkies at checkout on their website, outlawleather.com, and you can receive a whopping 15% off all their in-stock handmade leather goods. So what are you waiting for? Upgrade your gear with Outlaw Leather and join the ranks of those who refuse to settle for less. Visit outlawleather.com today and use Arc Junkies at checkout and save 15%. Outlaw Leather, the only choice for those who demand the best. We're also brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. Are you in need of high-quality maintenance welding solutions? Look no further than Rockmount. With over 50 years of experience and dedication to customer service, Rockmount is the go-to choice for all your maintenance welding needs. Their team of experts understands that every repair is different, which is why they'll work with you to find the product solution for your toughest challenges. With an extensive selection of rods and wires and abrasives, you'll be able to find exactly what you're looking for. And with a commitment to quality and innovation, you can trust Rockmount to deliver the best maintenance welding solutions on the market. Don't waste any more time searching for maintenance rods and wires. Choose Rockmount and see the difference for yourself. Visit them online at rockmountwelding.com, or you can give them a call at 1-800-272-7637 to learn more. And as an added bonus for listeners of the Arc Junkies Podcast, you can save 10% off on all their burrs, bits, blades, abrasives, and welding chemicals when you shop rockmountwelding.com and use Arc Junkies 10 in the discount box at checkout. Get the job done right the first time, every time with Rockmount. We're also brought to you by CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. Are you looking to step up your TIG game? Look no further than CK Worldwide, the industry leader in innovative and reliable TIG welding solutions. With more patents on product design and improvements than anyone else, CK sets the standard for TIG welding equipment. Whether you're a professional welder or a welding hobbyist, their exclusive innovations like gas saver kits, max flow water cooling technology, and wedge collets make your TIG welding process smoother and more efficient than ever before. And now they're excited to announce the launch of the new MT375 from CK Worldwide. A powerful 375 amp AC/DC welder with a dual pump water cooler, cart, torch package, and more. This new welding machine is packed with a newly patented 2-in-1 steady grip foot pedal that incorporates fingertip control into a foot pedal for a variety of different applications. Don't settle for subpar equipment. Choose CK Worldwide to experience quality and performance. With a reputation built on decades of experience and dedication to innovation, CK Worldwide is the only choice for top-of-the-line TIG welding equipment. Visit ckworldwide.com today and use the Find a Dealer tab to locate the closest dealer to you. CK Worldwide, the standard in TIG welding. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, so joining me in studio is Kuiper and Bryson Ward. So, Lori, we actually met at the Woodlands in Texas last year at the Welding Summit.
We did, because, and the interesting thing was that we share a birthday, and
Yes.
we were both there on our birthday.
We were both celebrating our birthday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, and I tell people all the time, like the welding community is massive, but it's very small and tight knit, because we met through a mutual friend, Scott. And then it turns out that you said something that, oh, you remind me of the guy I work with. And I was like, who do you work with? Bryson. And I was like, what's Bryson's last name?
Yeah.
Bryson Ward. And like, sure enough, like I know Bryson. He's out here in Florida. So I went to Texas and met somebody from the Chicago area that knows somebody in Ocala, like kind of like where I hang out. So it's kind of neat to see like how everybody inside the welding industry that's passionate about the welding industry, we all know each other.
Well, and this is something that I always caution people on too, is yes, it's a very small world, and you better hang on to your integrity. You better make sure that you don't treat people bad, because it's a very small world, and you know, you can lose it in a minute with getting blackballed in the community here, because it is a very small world.
Oh yeah, well, what do they say? It's the feet you step on today could be the ass you have to kiss tomorrow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Lori, how did you get your start in welding? Because I wanted to get you on here. You got a pretty interesting piece of history that I want to chat with, or chat about. How did you get into welding originally?
Well, you know, hindsight and learning a few things about myself personally in just the last few months even, I just recently found out at the age of 53 now that I have ADD.
Welcome to the club.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very, I've met a lot of people when I tell that, they're like, yeah, me too. I'm like, wow, all my friends have it. What does that mean? But the interesting thing is that part of what led me into my career now, I'm finding out, was the ADD, because I couldn't figure out what I wanted to study. I loved everything when I started college, you know, way back in the day there in 1987. And, you know, I liked everything. And so I had a really hard time trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And my father would ask me, what are you studying? What are we, you know, sending you to college for? And I said, well, for a while, you know.
What am I paying all this money for?
Yeah. And finally he said, all right, time out. You know, you need to take some time. You need to figure out what you want to do. And so I did. I stopped going to, you know, formally to school. I was taking some community classes, and one of the opportunities that came up was to apply for an apprenticeship at General Motors as a millwright welder. And I didn't know it at the time that I was applying for a millwright welder, or I might have been more cautious. I was just applying for an apprenticeship at General Motors. And the reason why that, to me, that was something that was comfortable to try was because I was a General Motors family. My grandmother worked and retired from General Motors. My uncle worked and retired from General Motors. My father has since then worked for 40 years and retired from General Motors. So I was a General Motors family.
Wow.
And I was living in Saginaw, Michigan at the time, and this ability to test for it came up. And so I applied for it and obviously was successful, got into the program, and then found out I thought I was getting into like electrical or something along that line. And they're like, well, no, we want you to be a millwright welder. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't even know what that is. I mean, I know what a welder is, but I didn't know what a millwright was at the time. I was, you know, in my early 20s. And so that first day that I walked in, and I should preface this, that I was a millwright welder in a foundry in Chicago there at Malibu Iron. And I walked into that foundry and I thought, oh my God, what have you done? Because it was like an episode of Walking into Hell, right?
A little warm.
Well, it was warm. It was very dark. The only light was coming from like the molten iron that was falling from the overhead crane and splashing to the floor near you with sparks flying everywhere. There was smoke, you know. And I thought, what did you do? You know, I don't know that this, you know, it was scary. It was a little bit scary. And I spent my first day with my first journeyman. And we're standing near the bench, and he hands me these cotton gloves, brand new pair, bright white, you know. And I put them on, and I'm like, and they're way too big because, of course, they don't fit women, right?
Yeah.
They're designed for
They
men.
still don't today.
Yeah.
To this day. I still have a hard time finding gloves for women.
Yes, yes. So I'm putting these gloves on, and I'm not really paying attention to what he's doing because I'm looking at him thinking, these are really big. They have a one size fits all for the guys. And he lights off an oxyacetylene torch, and I'm like, okay. And so I'm looking at him, and he grabs my hand, and he sticks it underneath the oxyacetylene torch. And it immediately goes woof and like burns off all of the really fine stuff that was all over it because they were like these cloth, And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, you got to burn off all these fine fibers. I'm like, yeah, you might want to tell a person before you grab somebody on their first day and stick their hand under an oxyacetylene torch. And again, that was my first day there. And I'm like, I think he was just trying to see, is she going to come back tomorrow? I don't know. But
so obviously you went back.
Yeah, I went back. I'm very stubborn. And that's one of the things that's probably driven me along my career path here is just being really stubborn, and no one's going to tell me that I got to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's yeah, I spent a lot of time there as an apprentice, taking different classes, learning to be a millwright welder, and like I often tell people, back then, in my early 20s, I was like 115 pounds, and I'm 5'4", and I felt like Barry Sanders standing next to the offensive line, right? There were these, giants around me, and I'm very small. And they would do things like, I had one journeyman that would we had to take some chain up. So he would get all this chain and he'd throw it over my neck and give me a couple pails. And, I'm telling my dad, what my day is like. And he's like, you tell them, blah, blah. And I'm like, can't, Dad, I got to just take it. I got to keep going. And so luckily I was very fortunate that I realized that welding was something I didn't have to be very strong to do. And I liked it. And so I just kept taking more welding classes. I took a couple on my own with my apprenticeship classes. And the head of the program at the community college that I was at was like, listen, you need to go on and go to Ferris State and get your welding engineering degree. He's like, we have a ladder program. You can do the first 2 years here. You do the last 2 years. You really need to try it. And so I did a lot of thinking about it. And, he's like, I want you to look around. Look at the people that you're working with. He's like, they're broken. They've ruined their bodies. They're really unhappy, and, they're just, do you want to do that for the rest of your life? And so I really spent some time, and I'm like, because it was a great job, I was making really good money. I was an apprentice at General Motors, a lot of overtime, a lot of double time, and it was a big risk that I took at that time to make that decision to go on and do something else. And at that time, welding engineering, you didn't hear about welding engineers.
No. Now, within your apprenticeship program, were there a lot of other females that were in the program? I was the first of 3 women that they put in the trades. And I'll be honest, I could tell, that what they did was they rotated us through the different areas. So you would be in power and free, and that's the one that did all the overhead crane work. You would be in melting, and then you were working on the furnaces, and you would be so we had all these different areas that we had to rotate through every 4 months. And I would know within the first day whether the next 4 months were going to be really rough or not, and it was kind of an every other kind of rotation because, again, we were the first 3 women that they put on, and some of the guys were like, you took that from somebody, you took that from somebody's brother, you took that from somebody's son that could have got in, and so there were times it was kind of rough, and some of them were really good, and it was good enough that, and I felt challenged enough and enjoyed it enough that I wanted to do more of the welding. And I got to the point where that was kind of what I became known for there.
like the shift manager would like pull up on his buggy and, hey, grab your hood, jump on. We got something hot over here. We need you to go weld. And so that was kind of what I dug into. And
that's got to be a good feeling that they're like rolling up specifically calling you out by name to go fix some stuff.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, at times it kind of felt that way. And at other times I realized that a lot of them were older and they just couldn't see anymore.
Yeah,
so, I still had my vision, So, I didn't realize at the time, that it was something kind of cool. But looking back, yeah, I realized I was getting better. I was getting, known for, let's get Kuiper. She'll go do it. We can shove her into that hole. She'll fit.
Yeah, she'll fit. She's small enough to get in there. That's the downside of being a small welder.
Oh.
You get inside the pipe, weld from the inside.
There was one, I got hung by my ankles down a shaft that we had because it was the hot metal. They would, once they got done with the parts and stuff, they'd funnel them down this chute and it would wear out, right? Hot metal that's got, sand and everything all over it. It was abrasive, it would wear out. So they like shoved me down and held me by my ankles down in this chute to weld this new panel. Yeah, there were a lot of things that I look back on and I'm like,
oh shit, is this safe?
Yeah, I'm thinking, why did I let them do this to me? But no, it was a learning experience. And we'll leave that at that. It was a learning experience.
Yeah.
Things that I didn't want to do anymore. So yeah.
So then you decided to go off to Ferris State.
I did. And again, that was, you look back at your life, and that was like one of the pivotal moments for me. Making that decision to leave General Motors. And I mean, I had one of the journeymen was like, what are you doing? Welding engineering, is that even a thing? Do you even know if you're going to get a job? You've got like this great job here. What are you thinking? People would kill for your job. And I'm like, I know, it's a great job. It really is. But, I think there's more, right? I think there's more I can do. And, but to have him say that to me, I was like, really like, wow, maybe I'm making a big mistake. And so then, I decided to do it anyway. I'm like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it and see what happens. So for that semester, it was 2 hours away. I was in Saginaw going to over to where Ferris is in Big Rapids. And I actually had a rotation where I was on third shift at that time. So I would drive over in the morning to hit my classes, drive back, try to sleep for 3 or 4 hours before I went on third shift. And I mean, I about killed myself that semester, but I knew it was enough that I wanted to continue doing it. And so I ended up taking a hiatus, is what they called it. And, in between your third and fourth year there, I had to do an apprenticeship. And I ended up going to Miller Electric to do my apprenticeship. And that was such a eye-opener, as far as what I wanted to do. And that like cinched it for me. Yeah, I'm gonna go on and do that. And I actually got hired at Miller Electric, I think it was like in December before I graduated in May. So that made it really hard to really buckle down that last semester there. But, when you already have your job, But, yeah, so I ended up leaving General Motors and then went and finished up and went on to Miller Electric for another 6 years after that. So
now, while you were at Miller, you did some pretty cool stuff.
I did. In fact, one of the things that they started us with, I think there were like 4 or 5 of us that were hired at one time when we came into the program. And because there was a larger group of us, they decided to rotate us through. Miller is different from Lincoln in that Lincoln is like all one unit. You know what I mean? But Miller Electric breaks theirs down into separate business units. So you've got the engine drive business unit. You've got, at the time it was called, I just lost it. They had 3-phase. They had the TIG business unit, and then they had basically the unit that did all the XMTs and what became the access power source and that kind of thing. And so we rotated through all of those different areas. And it was like, no, she doesn't quite fit here. Let's rotate her to the next one. And eventually I ended up in R&D. And I don't know if it was because like I didn't fit in all of those other business units, because like if you've ever been to Miller and you've ever been to Wisconsin, they're like super nice people. They are so nice. Like I used to say, like, you can't, when you are working on something, if you didn't like it, the phrase was, you know, you can't say that the baby's ugly. You know what I mean? And so, you know, like I didn't fit in because I'm like, that's an ugly baby. You know, it's one of those things where
So you got to kind of like learn the new culture.
Yeah. And I wasn't going to get there. I'm on a, you know, I am not, there's a reason why I fit into the niche that I fit into, which is pipe welding, because I'm a pipe welding type person. And I didn't realize it at the time until I found my people. And so my last rotation, I ended up, they're like, you know what, let's just put her with Rick in R&D for a little bit till we figure out what to do with her. That's kind of the impression that I got. And so I was working with Rick Hutchison, which he is such a fantastic guy. And his title was Arc Physicist.
Arc physicist. I've never even heard of that.
That was his title at Miller. He was
That's a pretty badass title.
That's a badass title, right?
Have that on your business card?
Yeah. So he was an arc physicist, and he did R&D work, and he was working on what, you know, Miller's answer to STT, right? And it's one of those funny things that, you know, now that I've been away from Miller and everything, I know how both companies do things. I've been to Lincoln many times, and, you know, everybody has their patents and everybody has their way of doing things. And Lincoln's was tied up really, really well with the way that they were doing things. And they had chopper technology is what it was that they were using with their original STT. And their STT process was kind of a mistake the way it evolved out in the world. They designed that to work with automotive and on thin gauge materials. And, you know, somebody just happened to go, hey, I think I can weld a root pass with that in pipe. And it just kind of took off from there.
That's what I was wondering, because I want to say they had the patent like way back in the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't until probably in the last 5 to 10 years that people were like, it's starting to catch on.
Yeah.
RMD and STT.
Yeah, well, I think I want to say it was like, if I'm putting my way back hat on and looking at the timeline of things, they had to have started kicking it off like in, you know, the pipe world taking it was probably 2001, 2002. Okay, that's probably about the window. Because we started working on it pretty intensely in like 2002 or 3. And so, you know, the way that we were working on it was, okay, we can't use physical technology, which is what the chopper is. And really the whole way that, you know, the whole premise behind STT and what became the Miller RMD is that it's a short circuit process that when you have it on a typical, you know, transformer rectifier type machine, you know, what you usually do short arc with, the machine's going to do whatever it needs to do in order to clear a short. When you actually, you know, go down and the droplet touches the plate, it's going to ramp up until it gets enough amperage to blow that free. And then the arc's going to reignite. And you know, the only control that you used to have over it was like there was a CP version, I think it was a CP 252 or something like that, that they could change, you know, where they tapped onto it for. You could physically go in and change the taps on where you tapped off the transformer rectifier. And historically prior to that, that's all that the option that you had to do to change the slope of the machine is what they called it. Well, with the advancement in inverters and, you know, using software to drive things, that's how Miller started approaching it. What Lincoln was doing was something that was, you know, totally new to anything that was out there. And it was the benchmark, right? And because they were the only one that was doing it, and they were doing it really well. And what they would do is when the wire would come down, you'd start forming a droplet with your amperage. And when that droplet fed down and actually touched the part, and a short was created, it would immediately, with the chopper technology, suck all the available energy. They'd flip that switch and it would suck all that available energy away, so that when it cleared and the arc was reignited, there wouldn't be hardly any amperage or voltage there, so that it would have a soft reignition to the arc, okay? So what we had to do when I was at Miller was try to find a way to do that with software. So we would try to drive the amperage down artificially so that when it cleared, so we'd, it was one of those really complex things that if you even ask me how I can do it, I can talk about it enough to say, well, we were watching the algorithm of the relationship between the amperage and the voltage, and that was the way that we were working around the patent, which they only watch the voltage. And so we were watching the algorithm of the amperage and the voltage, and when the two kind of started to meet with our slopes and everything else on the scopes, and then we would turn it back on and we would try to drive it as far as we can. Well, when you work with different gas mixtures, different wire diameters, it all changes with every different one. And so I spent probably 6-8 months working with Rick to figure out, one, how all of this stuff worked. And for the first little bit, I was just it was like an eye test continually all day, right? I would weld and he'd be like, well, do you like this one? Or do you like
number two?
Exactly.
Number two.
Eventually I'm like, dude, I can't tell anymore. It's been too many, But we would just do that and just keep working and working. And I learned such an appreciation for R&D work because I am not a patient person. Remember ADD. I already told you about that. I learned such an appreciation for R&D work because we would work for weeks and we'd be like, yeah, we're not going any further. We got to scrap this and go back to like date blah, 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 where we made this change, and throw away 2 months and be like, oh, we're starting over again. It's like, oh, really? And so, it was brutal for me. It would, man. I mean, I'm used to like, let's go. And so it was, again, it taught me patience a little bit. But he is such a good guy. We had fun. One of the things that I wanted to tell you about that was like, and I still talk about this today, but I'm going to talk about it again today, is one of the coolest things that we did. We had this high-speed camera, and I feel like I'm really aging myself, but this was back when high-speed cameras were like not that prevalent.
Yeah, it didn't exist. You couldn't get one on Amazon.
Yeah, you couldn't buy it off Amazon, exactly. And what we did was we videotaped the backside. We had like beveled plate, and we videotaped the backside of the weld coming down. And we compared standard short arc, and we compared the STT, and we compared what then didn't even have a name for it, our process that we were working on. And so we did the STT, and we watch it as it's coming down. And if you ever, I don't know anybody else that has like you won't find it on YouTube or anything. Now maybe someone would be like, oh, I'm going to do it because that would be cool to see. But you won't find it on YouTube or anything. But what was happening on the back side of that puddle, when you watch it in slow motion and on a high-speed camera, when you welded with the STT and the puddle came down, it was like someone pushing on the back side of a trampoline, like a heartbeat. Thump, thump. Bump, bump. And it was like so cool to see. And you're like, wow, that's awesome. And then we welded with standard MIG. And when I welded with it at a time, I'm like, it wasn't too bad. People were doing it all the time. People were still welding, root passes with standard short arc,
Mm-hmm.
But when you
still do it today.
Yeah. But when I looked at it on this high-speed camera, it was like, it started and it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, it was like someone beating on something. And then pretty soon, it was like the thing at the back of your throat. What's it called? The uvula. The uvula. It was like, that was like swinging around and coming at the camera like some alien thing, you know? And yeah, I mean, it was chaos, and it came all the way down, and I got done, and I'm like, oh, it wasn't too bad. And Rick's like, oh, wait till you see this. It was insane. I mean, it was crazy. And then I welded with the RMD, what became the RMD process. And while nowhere near the short arc, it still wasn't anywhere near what you were getting with the STT process, right? It was much more, it was like a little, like someone knocked like this, nice quiet knock, or someone went, you know, kind of thing like this. Mm-hmm. It was a little bit more aggressive, but it was nothing like the standard short arc.
Because you guys were doing it with software and they were doing it with mechanical means.
Yeah. So let's say that what Lincoln was reaching for an amperage, I would say was something like, they were probably in the mid-20s. They could drive it down to like the mid-20s.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, really low, right? We were lucky if we could get it to like 60, 65. I mean, with software, you just couldn't, I mean, you're talking,
couldn't drive it down fast enough.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking so many times per second that you're having to do this, right? And so, you know, we couldn't get there. But eventually through, I don't even know how many welds. I mean, I wish we'd have counted. How many welds did we do? How many times did we do this? But I mean, it was like a year, right? Before we finally reached the part where I'm like, you know what? I'm hesitant to say this because maybe it's an A, B, 1, 2. Which one did you like? I said, I think I like this better. You know, we finally got to that point where what I was really finding was it's a little bit crisper arc, but it kind of tends to go where you want it to go. Mm-hmm. The Lincoln's a little bit softer. The Lincoln's is, and you know, I hope I don't get, I'm like, shouldn't get in trouble for this, but you know, one of the stories that I like to tell is, one of my later jobs, I was working, for an industrial construction company out of Chicago, and the shop foreman went and purchased a bunch of equipment on his own. And I had Lincoln call me and go, what's going on? You didn't even let us like bid on this or, you know, come back on it. And so I call my guy, my shop foreman. I'm like, what? I just got a call from Lincoln. I said, you know, why did you just buy the Miller without even talking to me about this? He's like, oh, I'm buying these Miller pipe bro machines. He's like, man, they're really good. This RMD process, it's awesome. He goes, you know, and he's telling me all about it, you know, and he's like, it's fantastic. And, you know, and I said, yeah. I said, let me ask you a question. His name is Ken. And I said, Ken, let me ask you a question. You planning on doing any alloy work? Oh, yeah, we do a lot. Yeah, a lot of duplex. We do a lot of alloy work. And I go, yeah, you bought the wrong machine. And he's like, you can't tell me what I can buy. You know, I can buy whatever I want if I want to buy it.
You're right.
And I go, yeah, you can, Ken. I said, but, you know, it would have been nice to have this conversation ahead of time. I said, I love the Miller RMD machine. I didn't even, you know, he didn't even know anything about my background, really. You know what I mean? I'm like, I love that machine. I said, and it is fantastic on carbon steel and stainless steel. And if that's all you're doing, rock it out, man. I said, but if you're trying to do alloy work too, I go, that's not where it shines. I go, and I said, let me ask you another question. You doing any code work? And he's like, yeah, everything we do is code work. And I go, yeah, the code's changing. I go, and you're going to have to say, I did it with the STT process, or I did it with the RMD process, and everything that you've already qualified with the STT process, you're not going to be able to use the Miller. You're going to have to requalify. And he's like, well, I didn't know that. And I go, again, a conversation would have been helpful at this point. And I told people later, and I'm like, you know, it was almost like I felt like I had just started there. I'd only been there like a month. And I'm like, it was like that prison movie where I had to go in and punch the biggest guy right in the mouth. I said he couldn't have picked a better. I mean, it was totally my wheelhouse. If it would have been like a sub-art question or something like that, I'd been let me double check on that. But I'm like, RMD to STT, totally in my wheelhouse. I said I had that one. So, yeah, great friend of mine now. He and I are like buds.
Now, how long did it take to develop the RMD process from the time you started over there until it was like, all right, now we can start putting this in machines and shipping them out?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I want to say the part that I worked on was easily a year. It could have been longer. But again, I mentioned how Miller's broke into business units. So they've got the centralized R&D group, which feeds, some technologies out to the different business units. And once they were able to say, okay, I think it's enough of a product that we can, we've got a couple of things that we, can build on. It's time for the business unit to take it. And they said, okay, so it's time, as we call it, to throw it over the fence. So it was going out to the, basically it's the automation group, right? And they were going to put it into the access, and they were going to do it, they were going to use it for, thin gauge, stainless, automotive, that kind of thing. And they're like, well, sidetrack, pivotal moment, again in my life. You mentioned, prior to this conversation that you wanted to talk about, my relationship with Pat Patrick and what I've done with her. And to anybody that knows Pat Patrick, Charles Pat Patrick, call him Pat. He's kind of, at that time when I first met him, I had no idea the impact this person was going to have on my life. He became like my mentor for years, still is. And one of our field people at the time, a business development manager, who again, another pivotal person in my life, Gary Lewis. He was, an outside business development. He was working with Pat and had brought him and several of his people. Pat at the time was with Fluor. And they brought them into the R&D group at Miller to see what we were doing. They were doing some other stuff, but it was kind of like, hey, here's a cool stop on the tour, see what we're working on. Well, little did we know that at that time, Pat had been working quite diligently with the STT process and had really grandfathered the doing stainless steel with no backing gas, which, again, we didn't have any idea of this. And he's like, really? What do we have here? And he was like a kid in a candy store, all of a sudden finding out that we were doing something with this. And that day in the lab, it just kind of happened. You know what I mean? Like they just stopped by. And Tony Ferguson was with him, and I think it was Ivan was with them. And, they're like, what do you got going on? We showed them all the stuff. They're looking at everything. And Tony Ferguson, to the people that know him, he was such a character. And this is my first time meeting him. And, he's such a character that, he's one of those people they've named an AWS scholarship for. They've created all this stuff. He was out there. He was out there in the industry and just phenomenal. But he was a character. And they decided that they were going to have a welding contest with Tony and Ivan. And so they said, Lori, we want you to judge this welding. We're going to have the two of them welding with it, and we want you to judge the welding contest, and the winner's going to get this new Miller hood, an auto darkening hood. Well, again, I didn't know Tony, but the avarice in his eyes, he was like, oh, he loved anything new. He loved anything that was like, he would in later years, he would show up when he'd come to visit Miller with the Miller catalog with certain things ear-dogged that he wanted, if you're looking for a gift idea, here, I
circled.
One time I'm like, Tony, what are you going to do with these? These are like the pennants for outside the when we put up a tent kind of thing, and you have the flapping pennants that say Miller on them. He's like, I don't have any of those yet. Okay.
Put them in my front yard.
Yeah. So I'm going to judge this welding contest. And the two of them weld with it, and neither one of them were really all that good, right? But Gary says to me, whatever you do, Ivan has to win this contest. And I'm like, he's like, you're the judge, but Ivan's got to win. And I'm like, okay, And so I go up, and Ivan's was pretty bad. But Tony's was pretty bad too. But Tony would have won the contest, right? But I'm looking at it, and so I'm like making up all this stuff, and I'm like, well, Ivan, you got a little suck back over here. You kind of missed this edge a little bit, but overall, and I'm like, really, I'm struggling to find anything good about either one of them because they, neither one of them were that good. And Tony's, I went over there and I would just, I beat it up pretty bad. And he's like, what? He couldn't believe it. He's like, and I'm like, I got to give it to Ivan. And he was like so totally crushed that he didn't win this hit. I mean, he was like pouting well, Gary had already intended he was going to give him a hood anyway, but he just really wanted to string it along for a little bit. So we had that day, and it wasn't, I want to say it was not long after that. It was probably like 2 months later that we decided we were at the point where, again, throw it over the wall, go take it out to a business unit. And, Patrick calls me, and he's like, hey, I want you to come down to Houston. I want you to, can you ship some equipment down? I want to look at this. I want to compare it to the STT because, the STT really shines in some areas and it struggles in others. And, he liked what he saw and he wanted to do some more. So I went down and we were in a shop out in LaPorte and it was about 120 degrees. And I was his welder. And I would weld, and he'd tell me what he didn't like, and I'd change it. I had a computer hooked up to everything, and I would make a change, and I would weld some more. And he'd say, all right, weld a little more. And so I'd weld a little more. And, I mean, pretty much the whole focus was I had to keep welding from 3 to 6 o'clock, or, I'm like, oh, my Lord. Finally, at one point, I'm like, Pat, it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, I'm tired. I'm like, I couldn't do it anymore. I'm like, I was drunk out. It was so hot. Anyway, we worked. And, finally we got it to the point where we started showing it to other people. We started doing, I did like a traveling show, as I put it. I went all over the world with that. And I got my ass kicked all over the world. I mean, it felt like it. You know what I mean? It was getting better every time. We showed it to somebody. They'd tell me what they didn't like. I'd try to fix this. I'd try to get it, And, yeah, I went everywhere. I mean, I was in China. I was in South Africa, Argentina, all kinds. Every orbital company in the world wanted to try to find a way to do a root pass with, basically they wanted to do just a root pass, open root. And then there were the ones like Pat that wanted to do, stainless steel, no backing gas. And so it was a juggling contest of what I was trying to do. And then we decided at Miller that it was time to create a pipe group, which we didn't have at the time. And as my boss at the time, Tim Temby, said, listen, this is kind of the way it's going to go. You remember how you were kind of drafted to be in he's like, now it's kind of your choice. You're kind of a free agent. Do you want to go to the new pipe group? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And so for a while, I was the only person in the pipe group. It was a pipe group of one. And it was a struggle for a little bit. I'm trying to do pipe by myself. And then they wanted to get into pipeline work. And I'm like, we had companies that were like donating pipe to us, right? 36-inch pipe. And I'm like, guys, I can't do 36-inch pipe by myself. I'm like, this is dangerous trying to fit this stuff up in the lab by myself, And, eventually we got some more people in it and it grew. And, I did that for a few years, for like 3 years. And eventually I was like getting really tired. I was all over the world and it was time to make a change. I left Miller, left all my friends and people. And I mean, that was another pivotal, hard decision to make, you know what I mean? Cause it was, I was like making a name for myself. And, so again, another pivotal decision. I decided to go to work for, Bill Newell and Roger Swain at Euroweld. And they were always the ones that I was calling whenever I had questions for what alloys I was working on, what we were doing, and if
that's the guy to call.
Those are the guys to call. Yeah. And so they made I'd done a couple of conferences with them. They'd had me come speak at some of their seminars. They would basically, the welding summit that now is a welding summit through the AWS, they kind of were doing their own welding summit with the Welding Research Council, and they were doing their own thing for years prior to that. And I had some of my, I had my most embarrassing moment ever in life at their seminar. I don't know if I want to talk about it here. I'll tell you. I'll tell you about it later.
We can talk after we hit the record button or hit the stop button.
Yeah, and but whenever I'm nervous about ever going to speak before a group again, I think, could it be worse than what happened?
Can't be any worse than that.
Can't be worse than that. And so that led me on. My career is kind of just, I've always been doing the same kind of thing, kind of focused in pipe. And like I said, those are my people. They really care about what they're doing, but they're kind of curmudgeonly, and a little bit prideful, I should say.
You
maybe
say that,
prideful.
Yeah. They're very passionate and proud about the work that they do.
Yeah. And I've met so many fantastic people out in industry, and it is such a small world. When you talk about pipe welding, fantastic. I've been so fortunate with the people that I've met and the people that have championed whatever I've done, and I'm just very, very fortunate.
Now, do you think those people have kind of helped direct you and kind of guide you on your path through, your welding journey? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We joke that we have what's called the welding mafia. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, we help each other, right? If you have a question, you call them. They might be at a competitor, but you call them and you go, hey, you ever seen this? Oh, yeah, we saw that, whether it's a problem with a certain filler metal or a certain application or whatever it is they're trying to do. We help each other out with things like that. I mean, it's a fairly small group, and if you're lucky enough to make it into the welding mafia, you're kind of a made man or a made woman, if you're very fortunate that they figure, I see enough in you to maybe bring you along and groom you and, help you on your career. And I was very fortunate. And
it's really cool.
Yeah. The list is long. It really is. The people that I consider kind of mentors. Pat Patrick is definitely one. Bill Newell is definitely one. Roger Swain. The people I've been fortunate to work with and now call, a brother from another mother, Scotty Witkowski, and Juvie and Gary Lewis, and just incredible people out there in the welding industry that are all out in different areas, but just very fortunate. Yeah, they're family.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you looking for top-quality welding equipment at an affordable price? Then look no further than Everlast Welders. Their high-performance welders are designed to meet the needs of both professionals and hobbyists with features like pulse welding, AC/DC capability, and easy-to-use controls. At Everlast Welders, they believe that everyone deserves access to top-of-the-line welding equipment, which is why they offer a wide range of machines to fit any budget. And with their 5-year warranty on most machines, you can trust that your investment is going to last for years to come. Visit everlastwelders.com today to browse their selection and find the perfect welder for your needs. And don't forget to use Arc Junkies in the comment section at checkout to get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch when you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. We're also brought to you by Strong Hand Tools. Are you a welding educator? Then you need to head on over to stronghandtools.com/Arc Junkies and sign up for the educational discount program. Just for signing up, you'll get a free fabrication toolkit and a Strong Hand t-shirt. Strong Hand carries a large selection of tables and tools to make your life as a welder and fabricator that much easier. These tools and tables help you increase speed and accuracy when it comes to welding and fabrication. So get your free toolkit today when you go to stronghandtools.com/Arc Junkies. Now let's get back into the show. Mm-hmm. I got to hang out with Scott for a couple of days before the Weld Summit kicked off, and he kept telling me about the welding Jedi Masters that are going to be over here at this Weld Summit. And I got to sit down at the table with you all, and I thought that was really cool. I sat in Bill Newell's class back in 2014, 2015. He did a whole program on pre and post seating of P91 pipe.
Yep.
And I was in the wrong class. I just thought it was pre and post heat. And I was like, I'd like to learn more about that because I just got into education. And no, it was way over my head. But I was there. I was like, I'm already here. I'm going to absorb everything I can. And that dude is ridiculously smart. And then I got to see him again over there at the Weld Summit.
Well, and so to be honest with you, let me explain my niche in this world of welding engineering, right? My like super strength or whatever is taking what they say and making it something that the common people can not only understand, but find a use for. Mm-hmm. Okay. Like, oh, hey, I think I can use that. Because I would, when Bill and Roger would do their seminars, Eurowell would do their seminars, they're incredibly knowledgeable. And the people that they would bring in would be incredibly knowledgeable. And I'm like, I think I'm pretty good at this stuff. Pretty good. I mean, I have a fairly good understanding of what we're talking about and what we're doing. But I would sit there and I'd be like, damn, they lost me like 4 slides ago. and I purposely would sit next to somebody that I didn't know when I was at these, right? And every time I'd lean over and I'd go, you have any idea what they're talking about? And almost always someone would be like, I think I'm in the wrong room. I don't understand it. And so when I went to work for Bill and Roger, I told them, okay, this is my area of focus. I'm doing welding for dummies, all right? And I'm not saying like welders are dummies, but I'm saying when you're talking about, the phase diagram of blah, 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 yeah, they have no use for that. 80% of the people that we're talking to, they don't have any use for that. I want to talk to them about how to take, how we can improve your production rates using an advanced process, and how you can actually take it and use it somewhere and, try to get more productivity or try to get better quality out of what you're doing. I said, that's my focus. And that's what I did. So I've totally focused on taking something that's too complicated as far as the message that a scientist is trying to put out, a metallurgist, and try to make it something that's useful for a project manager, for a welding foreman, for a welder, where they're actually like, oh, that's cool. And that's really my niche, is taking something that's complicated and breaking it down or making it palatable to somebody that can actually use it there in the world. That's
my buddy. I got a friend, Padraig Bean. He actually works for Lincoln, but he does like on-site training and stuff like that. But we had a chance to talk down in Miami last year at the Instructors Institute, and he was saying there's a huge need for somebody that can just be the translator between the engineer and the welder.
Yep.
Because we speak completely different languages when it comes down to it. Like what, that's why there's standard terms and definitions. But not every welder understands that. Like, tell me what you need on this, on this piece of pipe.
Yeah.
And I can do it. Well, we talk about like you were saying, like the phase diagram, like that doesn't mean anything. The molecular structure, don't care. What do you need this weld to look like? What's it holding?
Yeah.
What process am I using? Like, just break it down to brass tacks for me.
Yep. Yeah. And so, that was kind of like, this was something that I noticed, and this was something that I pointed out to them to help them notice it, is that one of the presentations that I gave was at EPRI, and it was one of their fossil conferences and whatever. And I'd actually been invited to like be the MC to all the other ones. And all that means is that I got to hold the microphone and walk up to people when they had questions afterwards and like say, what, did you have a question? So yeah, it was a really important role there. But so I was there through all of the other presentations. And then I gave my presentation. And I bet I had like 20 questions. The other ones, I'm like, does anybody have any questions? Crickets. You know what I mean? We might get one person that would ask something, you know what I mean? But I'm like, this is what I'm trying to tell you guys, is that there's a need to like break it down, break it down a little bit and make it so that they can see some value in taking what you're trying to give them and actually use it in the field.
How do I apply this?
Yeah.
They always told us in the military, break it down Barney style.
Yeah.
Like the big purple dinosaur. Everybody could understand him. Like, break it down Barney style.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of been, like I said, that's my superpower, is taking something that's a little complicated. I wonder if I can break that down. I'm like the IKEA of of welding. I'll take it and break it down to people. So
yeah, my buddy Ryan has a really good knack for that. He'll take he'll teach metallurgy with Laffy Taffy, or he'll teach admixture with chocolate milk with chocolate syrup and milk, and then he'll use like the here's what arc length actually does, or here's what your travel angle actually does. When you blow across the surface of this chocolate milk, you can actually see the penetration profile change. So he's explaining metallurgy to kids that are like 6, 7, 8 years old.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's his knack. He'll take something super complex and break it down to where a kindergartner can understand it.
Well, see, now I'm really embarrassed because I'm like, I wanted to see the chocolate milk thing. Now I feel like a 6-year-old.
I can show you.
Yeah.
I started doing it with my students because it just made so much sense. And it's like, okay, blow a little bit harder. That's your amperage. Okay, point it straight down. You see how it's like blowing stuff everywhere? That's weld spatter.
Yeah.
So let's reduce our breathing a little bit, i.e. turn down your amperage, and then we're going to give it a little bit more travel angle, and you're going to be able to see the penetration profile change. Yeah. And you're not going to end up with all this spatter.
Yep. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and I might have to reach out to him and pick up a couple nuggets there.
He's
to throw
super
into my
smart. I did his welding educator workshop for he used to teach them up at Lincoln for, I think I attended 4 of his classes, and now he's kind of doing his own educator training. We had him over at the school back in July of last year. I think it was late June, early July last year. But yeah, he's great. He just got back from Africa, so I'm going to have him on the show. He went over to Africa to train a bunch of kids over there how to weld.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so I mean, he's probably one of the most passionate people I know when it comes to welding, and he can just break it down super simple.
That's awesome. And see, I really love that kind of thing. I might have to talk to him. Bryson and I had some conversations about maybe we should do some podcast stuff. We work for Ready Arc, and I really love what we're doing. We're out there helping people, trying to get them equipment and trying to figure out how to, Solutions, yeah. But, what we've got is so many companies and individuals that are trying to find ways to do things easier, faster, right? It's always, and I hammer my Ready Arc team here when I'm training them. One thing you've got to keep in mind, you're always going to pay the piper. You think you're cutting a corner. You think I can do this, and if I do this, then I don't have to do that. It's always going to come due. You're going to have to. If you try to go with flux core, you're probably going to end up having to post-weld, heat treat, or bake out now, as opposed to if you did it with TIG. And so, we talk about different things like that. But one of the products that I manage at Ready Arc is orbital welding. And I don't know how many times it happens where we get somebody that is now neck deep in trouble on a project deadline, and they think they're going to switch horses and start doing orbital welding in the middle of this project because they're behind. And I'm like, I spend a quarter of my time saying, no, this isn't a good idea for you. You don't need to be doing this. You have to put a plan together. You have to crawl, walk, run. I'm like, you can't start out running. You're going to fall on your face. And so, it's all about, educating people and trying to help them move into orbital welding and to do it correctly. Like I said, if we're renting or leasing or selling equipment, I'm like, I don't want somebody to just rent something once and have it go bad and get a bad taste in their mouth. I would much rather, let's do a small little piece. Let's get your feet wet. Let's learn what it is. You can't speed up one part in the middle and hope that everything else is going to go faster. We gotta, you gotta plan for it. And so, I love that. I love helping people. And that's really what I focus on is, I don't like to think of, I'm working in the sales world. No, I'm working helping people try to solve their problems. Again, like Bryson said, solution selling. And so that's a lot of what we do is trying to stop people from hurting themselves.
So do you guys provide, if somebody calls up and they're like, hey, I want an orbital TIG system, or I want a suitcase, or I want an XMT, do you guys provide training if they need it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And say, hey, this probably isn't the best application for what you're renting.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Probably happens a lot.
We do that. Yeah, because a lot of times they call with an idea in their head, and they might have seen one little thing, but we're like, well, this will do it a lot better. And they're like, oh, really? I had no idea we could do that. And I'm like, yeah. And so, yeah, it's all about, one, we've got to understand what they're doing, what they're trying to do, and how to get them there. And that's what, again, we like to say we are welding, and that's what makes us different, is because we do focus on trying to bring them along and get their process better. Because we want them to come back to us. We want them to think, hey, that worked last time. Let's call them up and see. We got a different project. It's totally different, but let's see what they can do to help us out. And yeah, so we like to start right at the beginning. Don't call us when you want something next week. Call us when you're planning something, and we can help you put a better plan together.
So when you're drafting up your bid and everything, like, call us at that point. Let me make sure you're getting the right equipment sent out for what you intend to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, we will actually spend time trying to get you fewer generators on site, and the right size generators on site, and the right welding equipment on site, so you're not paying for more than what you have to have, and you make better use of it. So many people, this is one of the things that we found, this is a big one, is that everyone had in mind they had to have a 500 amp diesel. Well, then we found out they're only welding it
200 amps, 300 amps.
Yeah, 300 amps. And we're like, you'd save a lot of money if you did this. I mean, we'll rent you the 500 if you really have to have it, but, you'd save a lot of money if you did this. Well, why are you telling me that? We would like you to do the best you can do so that you're successful. Maybe you'll come back to us again. And, that's a lot of what we do, is try to put them in the best opportunity to succeed. We want to partner with them and make them better. So, yeah.
And a lot of times, we have customers that call us and say, hey, we're putting in a bid for this job, and this is the type of process we're thinking about. And we'll go into the R&D lab and say, okay, we're going to try this, this, and this, and then present them with the best case scenario. Yeah. So, what can we do to make you better, faster, and make more money?
So you guys actually do product testing and R&D at your facility.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
See, now I always thought Ready Arc was just, and forgive me for my ignorance, because that's the only exposure I ever had to them, was just like equipment rental. Like when I was doing structural steel iron worker, we'd get like a dual pack on a trailer that would come in, or we'd get, a couple 6-packs or something like that, if we had a big job, and it was just like machines and leads. But I was at the level of just like managing a crew, not planning and bidding a job. So I didn't know that you all actually do R&D and like your testing stuff. And
well, we don't physically test welds ourselves, but we will help them with some R&D on some stuff if they want to send us some parts and stuff. We'll do some things like that. But yeah, we do a lot of 4-packs and feeders, and I mean we call that that's the core of our business, is that's the main stuff. But we do a lot of what we call specialty equipment. We do a lot of weld automation, where they're doing maybe they're doing a grow line, maybe they're doing some fixed automation with some sub-arc systems and some positioners and turning rolls. Again, I have the orbital. I also have the heating line. So we're talking, induction heating and resistance heating for post-weld heat treating and that kind of thing. And, we've got quite a breadth of product. Dry ice blasting. We do a lot of that for, industrial cleaning, paint booths, that kind of thing. Very, very broad mixture of everything that it's all focused around welding, though. And that's what, that's how we focus things, is we don't want to get too broad and too far out in the weeds. Focus on what you're good at. And, that's what we do. Yeah,
I'm going to say 2 years ago, I think Ready Arc teamed up with Miller to do a pre and post weld heat treatment at like, it wasn't the AISC convention. It was some kind of steel erectors conference down here in Orlando. And I went out there and did some volunteer work for Genie and ran some of their lifts. They've got like the weld on platform, but like during the time that I wasn't doing a presentation, I went over and I was watching this pre and post heating thing. And like the way that they can configure these things and how fast you can heat up like mass pieces of steel. Like we're talking 2, 3, 4 inches.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. Like I said, it was like, okay, get me a machine and a wire feeder, and then we're good. Like that's all I really knew about Ready Arc.
Right. Well, and see, that's where I tend to go off into the weeds a little bit, and I say things like, just because we can do it, maybe we shouldn't do it. When I was at Miller, and that was when they were first rolling out the induction heating systems and everything else, and the big sales pitch has always been, look how fast we can get this to temperature. And I'm like, yeah, the that's not the best thing for the materials. You know, I'm like, we need to think about what we're doing to the materials, getting it there quite that quickly and
not a good thing metallurgically.
Not always. No.
Yeah, you're supposed to increase like 50 or 100 degree increments for a certain amount of time.
Or even just a couple hundred per hour as opposed to 610 minutes, you know.
Well, if you're looking to build a longbow or something, then, you know, you could heat it that quickly. But
yeah. Well, and, you know, part of the training that I do with our people, that's what I'm doing down here, visiting your fair state of Florida this week, is I'm training our folks on Heating 101 is what I call it. And sidebar again, it's that ADD.
It happens.
That ADD just kicked in again. When I did the post-weld heat treating conference at the Weld Summit last summer that you and I met at, I had a weld engineer. There was a weld engineering team actually from was it Becht or Bechtel?
Bechtel.
I think it was Bechtel. And yeah, it was Bechtel. And they came up to me and they said, "Oh my God, we've loved this heat treating conference. We've learned so much." And they said they were both, I believe, Ohio State grads, but they pointed out we didn't have any of this training in school.
Well, they should have went to Paris State.
Well, no. See, and that...
I'm from Ohio. I can say that. Get away with it.
Yeah. Well, the reason... And so what really struck a chord with me is that I'm like, oh, we didn't study that either. I mean, we talk about, you know, in metallurgy class, well, you have to preheat this, you have to post-weld heat treat this. We don't talk about any of the ways to do it. We don't talk about any of the equipment, none of the methods, nothing. I'm like, yeah, we don't really teach that anywhere. And so like the Heating 101 class that I put on, and I've been putting on all of our Ready Art people through, all of them, even finance and marketing, everybody, is the basics of heat treating and why we do it and what we're trying to achieve and what a preheat does and what a bakeout does and what a post-weld heat treat. Again, Lori's Welding and Heating for Dummies, you know, but trying to break it down and put it into knowledgeable, you know,
digestible pieces.
Exactly. I was going to say edible. That edible doesn't seem to be
good.
Yeah. Digestible pieces so that they actually understand what we're trying to do and why they have to make sure that certain pieces go out with the equipment. And I said, you all touch it in some way, shape, or form. And understanding what we're doing, you know, and educating. I'm like, you know, the Ready Arc people are going to be some of the best educated people on heat treating in the country as far as I'm concerned because nobody teaches it. And I'm branching out. I'm going to be, we're offering this to a lot of the air gas folks too, because again, I've realized that nobody teaches any basics of heat treating anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't know where to go to learn how to. And the same thing with welding on different alloys. Mm-hmm. Like I got a buddy up in Canada, and I was like, "Hey, where did you go to school for this?" He's like, "Well, I just kind of learned from this guy." Mm-hmm. It's like, well, like where do you go to learn how to weld on P91 or chromoly or like you know some of these like exotic materials? Because especially all the trade schools throughout the United States, you weld on carbon. Mm-hmm. Most of them don't even weld on stainless, or aluminum. Like, my kids were kind of lucky. They got to do steel, stainless, and aluminum, but we're not bringing in titaniums and Inconels and all that stuff. It's just too expensive. So where do you go to learn how to weld on this stuff? Where do you go to learn how to pre- and post-heat weld or pre- and post-weld heat treatment? I mean, where do you learn this stuff at? On the job. And hopefully the guy or the gal that you're learning it from, hopefully they have some formal education or they've been doing it right for 20 years. Because if not, they're just passing down bad knowledge. Yeah,
well, and that's exactly it. Everything has been learned on the job training. And, you know, we have, unfortunately, through attrition, we're losing so much of that, right? And we've got folks that perhaps shouldn't be teaching people how to do these things now. You know, what scared me or scares me is that I actually had a young woman at the Weld Summit a couple years ago came up and said, "Oh my God, you're like the godmother of advanced process welding." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "No." How did that happen? I'm not that old. And it's like all of a sudden I'm that person. And I'm like, how did that happen? When did that happen? How did I get to be that old that I'm considered like, I mean, I was okay with like, you're the aunt.
You're the
You're
aunt.
the favorite aunt.
Now you're like the fairy godmother of post-weld heat treatment.
Godmother sounds a little too close to grandmother of welding,
Right.
but yeah. So, yeah, it's I'm in that weird part where we didn't have a lot of people come into the industry, age-wise. There aren't that many folks in their 50s, right?
No.
They're either really old or they're really young at this point.
Yeah.
And that middle group is pretty thin. And we as a country are losing so much knowledge, and we just need to try to soak up as much as we can before it's gone. So it's a scary, scary time.
Yeah. And a lot of companies, like, I think they kind of screwed up, like prior to these folks that have been doing it for the past 20, 30 years, prior to them retiring, why not say, hey, I'm going to bring in a new person, and I want you to train them everything you know over the next 2 years before you retire, kind of give you a little bit lighter load, as far as work goes, but like I need you to pass that information on. They didn't want to do that. I don't want to add somebody else to the payroll when I already got somebody doing the job. Well, guess what? When that person packs up their toolboxes and, they put it in the garage, to collect dust, and they go off onto the golf course or, out on the boat to go do their fishing, you're not calling them up and being like, hey, how did you do this?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. You might be able to call them up, but they're smart enough to know
not to answer.
No, they'll answer, but you're going to pay them 3 times as much to come back, and you're still going to pay that guy the same other salary that you were. Now it's going to cost you, 2 or 3 times as much as if you had just hired that person and trained them.
Yeah, because a lot of them are retiring, and they're smart enough to set up a consulting business.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's the best way to do it.
Yeah. That's why I said they're smart enough to do that. Yeah. So, we still have the elder statesmen out there. We still have the Bill Newells and the Walt Spurkos and the I hesitate. Scotty's in the same group as me. He's in the 50s group. I think. I hope I didn't just he's going to be like, no, I'm only 47. But
I want to say he is like 47, 48.
No, he's right in that range. But yeah, we've got a lot of folks with some good knowledge, but we gotta squeeze it out of them.
Yeah, I actually have Scotty and Bill Newell coming on the show along with Mike Miller next week. They're going to be on the show to promote the hydrogen conference, because that's a big thing coming now is hydrogen. Because fossil fuels are evil and dangerous and bad. So the hydrogen is going to be the next big thing.
Dude,
and so
don't
we got
even
to
get me started.
Get prepared for that.
Don't get me started.
Oh, we we can get going.
All right, are you ready? Are you ready for my soapbox?
Yeah.
All right, here's my soapbox. My soapbox is I do believe hydrogen is the future. And I think...
it's definitely coming.
Oh, yeah. And what I keep... I work with a lot of people in the oil and gas. That's what my career has been based on, is oil and gas people, right?
Pipe.
And I'm like, listen, you can be the person with his horse who's saying, I'm not going to use those darn horseless carriages. Or you can, figure out a way to start using a horseless carriage. I said, I don't want us to be the country that says, well, we can't do that. Nobody can do that. We can't do it. No, we can do it. We just have to want to do it. And there are so many reasons why we should be doing it and trying to make it economical to do it. Why do we want to become a third world country and be behind everybody else? You know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
Now, you kind of want to lead the charge on that.
Yeah.
The only thing that scares me is the Hindenburg. So, hydrogen's 4 times lighter than air?
Dude, steam engines used to blow up all the time. 10 times
more expensive or explosive than gasoline.
No, I totally understand that. That's always a caution, right? But
we're going to put that underground and we're going to travel over.
Steam engines used to blow up all the time and kill people.
Pressure.
If we don't keep making strides and we don't keep trying to do something, we're not going to get better.
I'm just interested to see how it all works, because hydrogen, as we know, hydrogen in welding is bad. And it's such a tiny molecule that we have to post-weld heat treatment, or we have to bake out to get it out.
Yep.
What happens once everything's in there and we don't detect any leaks or anything like that? But there's something in there, and it's just, hydrogen wants to get out.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're going to trap it, and we're going to ship it all across the U.S. in pipes.
Well, what's going to be important? Heat treating.
Yeah. Well, then, and that's why I want to go to the conference, because I was like, how are you guys going to do it? What are we going to store this in? Where is it going to be stored?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's I would venture to say it's probably more dangerous than setting up a nuclear facility in your backyard than,
Yeah, it can be. And this is, all right, so I'm going to be like a little bit sappy or whatever, As I've said, I've worked my life in oil and gas. And I got to tell you, I got that like ick factor, right? That little bit of bad karma. And I'm like so excited to be working for the company that like owns us now, which, as I mentioned, Ready Arc, or owned by Airgas, who's owned by Air Liquide. And if you look up any of the stuff that Air Liquide has really been championing and what they've been working on, they are so far out there in hydrogen and green energy and what they're doing that I'm like, oh, I'm so glad to be working for a company that's trying to do something right, as opposed to keep doing things that are detrimental or totally capitalist. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of what happens in the oil and gas industry benefits, I can't even say 1%. I'm saying it's like 0.25%. When I start talking to my people in the field and they start wanting to bash anything with like electric vehicles or hydrogen or anything, I'm like, explain to me exactly what do you personally derive from using fossil fuels? I mean, do you like own a lot of fossil fuel stock? Are you getting dividends on something? Or are you, well, no. Well, then can't you be happy with the same type of vehicle that gets you from point A to point B that doesn't impact the environment, or that is clean energy and doesn't give us a lot of pollution that we're breathing in, makes people healthier? Eventually it's going to be cheaper. We got to get through that point. But I'm like, why do you have a personal vendetta against it? I don't understand. I'm like, I don't benefit personally from it. I would love to have the same thing that is cleaner, though. I mean, we're going to have to go through those growing pains, but I just don't understand people's,
resistance.
It's change.
Yeah.
Well, it's different.
We're all stubborn.
We are all stubborn. Nobody likes change. But it's beyond that. It's not just the stubborn of not liking change. It's like it's a personal affront to people. You know what I mean? I'm like there's been so much opposition research put out there that you're not a real man if you don't drive a truck that guzzles gas. You know what I mean? It's become like a personal machismo insult if you in any way say, hey, that might be a good idea to do something that improves the climate and improves our air. I mean,
But I mean, like, I don't think there will ever be an end to fossil fuels. Because, I mean, like, aside from gas, a lot of people don't understand, like, that's where all your plastics and polymers come from.
Exactly.
That's where a lot of paint pigments come from. Yep. That's where, like, I mean, think about it. Go through your house now. Everything's switching over to plastic or metal.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
yep.
I've got a great display in here, like my recorder, my screens, my LP player, coffee pot. It's all plastic, and that's all derived from fossil fuels.
Well, see, and that's the point, right? Is that we keep growing all of the things and all of the fossil fuel needs with all of these other things that we're doing. It's not just the gas that we're putting in our car. It's not just the shingles we're putting on our house. It's we just keep growing and growing and growing that need. Well, guess what? It's not finite. It's not always going to be there. Mm-hmm. And it does make us dependent on other countries, which are often gets us into
hostile
geopolitical messes. Yeah. And, there are other options, and we need to consider whether
we definitely need to explore it. I mean, as a society, like, you can't, like, I mean, we're not working with wood tools and, stones anymore. So, I mean, You have to progress as a society.
Yeah. We can say, I'm not going to progress. No, you can't make me. I mean, that's our mindset. You can't make me. Why do we have to make you? Why can't you want to? I mean, I'm like, seriously? And, and this is something, like I said, ADD, I'm a geek. I really love learning things. I'm always reading new things. I just learned that Iceland is 100% renewable.
Yeah.
They used to rely totally on imports.
No, they recycle like 100% of everything.
Oh yeah, but I mean, all of their energy is renewable now. They don't import oil and gas for that kind of stuff anymore. And it's like, you know why? Because they wanted to. Why do we have to wait until it's a dire situation? Let's start working. Let's start improving. I'm like, I just don't know when we became a country that went from, we can put a man on the moon, to, we can't run a car without.
Well, there's a lot of money in fossil fuels.
Well,
but,
and that's
same thing
exactly.
with like petroleum
It's not any money that's benefiting me, really.
Well, yeah, no, I'm not getting a royalty check.
That's what I keep saying. Why do you have this personal?
But I think hydrogen would be a much better alternative as opposed to fossil fuels than relying on battery powered. Just for the simple fact that a lot of that stuff can't be recycled the way that stuff has to be mined. What's the carbon footprint going to be to mine everything that we need? Are there enough of those precious minerals to sustain everybody driving around in a Prius or a Tesla or whatever?
Well, and you know, that's always the big statement too, is you have to burn so much more fossil fuels to do those. And granted, at this point in time, that's probably true. I do know that when you do drive that Prius or whatever vehicle, you have much lower emissions, though. So there's that point of it, which is better.
The emissions are lower, but you're still charging it into a port that's ran by fossil fuels. So until we kind of like migrate, that's what I'm saying. I'm just happier to see an alternative to battery powered. Yeah. Just because of the way that, you know, all the mines and all that stuff.
Definitely. Yeah.
Having alternatives, and I think hydrogen could be that solution. I'm interested in going out there to take that class and find out, like I said, how are you going to store it? How are you going to transport it? How is it going to be utilized? How are we going to make this safe so we don't have a bunch of little mini Hindenburgs driving down the road?
Oh yeah, and like I said, that was like, ooh, what happens if you get in an accident? I mean,
what was it? The Ford Pinto that had like the gas tank in the back that anytime it got rear-ended, it blew up. Yeah, it was a Ford Pinto.
Yeah. Well,
hopefully we learned from that.
Well, that's what it's all about, moving forward.
Yeah,
we learn, we make mistakes, and we keep on going.
Yeah. Well, and you know, that's the hope, right? I love going back and thinking about, okay, Invertech, XMT, pretty bulletproof now, right? We had to live through the years of what was called the Kapowcon. It was just the PowCon, but they ended up calling it the Kapowcon because it would blow up as we went through the evolutions of making it better. I mean, there's always growing pains, and we just have to keep striding, especially as a country. If we want to stay on the cutting edge, and we don't want to be buying, pardon my French, shit from everybody else in the world eventually.
Yeah. I'd like to see us a little bit more self-sustaining. I remember when I grew up as a kid, like everything was made in USA.
Yep.
And now it's made in Mexico, made in China, made in India, like made in Pakistan, Bangladesh.
Yeah. Well, we're going through the other side of the cycle of that now,
going through
right?
like a consumer phase. Everybody else is going through their industrial revolution.
Yeah.
And we're going through like...
We need to bring it back.
We're just consuming everything.
Yeah. Well, no. We're in the process of, okay, we made some mistakes. Our capitalism went a little too far. We've decided we need to, even though it costs us a couple of dollars more, we need to make it here in the U.S. and control our own destiny. And, we're going through that phase. We're bringing it all back. We're building that up again. We have to build that infrastructure up again. And that's the phase that we're in right now. We're also in the phase of trying to find all of our alternative energy solutions. And it's really a cool time to be alive and to be living through, as long as you're looking at the positive and all of the things that we're trying to do. There's so many people that want to look at the negatives. And, and if you embrace change, and if you, my opinion, embrace change, look at, what can I do? There's so many avenues. There's so many new things to look at and try. So many exciting things in the welding industry. I mean, God, when I was talking to some of the students at the Fab Tech, and I'm like, I know that right now you're slugging through 60-10, 70-18. I'm like, just keep going. Just keep going and get through this part of it, because it is so cool when you make it to the other side. I'm like, you have so many things that you can go work on. You can work with, robotic, cobotic equipment. You can go work in aerospace. You can do inspection afterwards. You can do RT. You can do, ultrasound. You can do,
weld engineering.
Weld engineering. But I mean, there's construction. I'm like, and if there was anything that if I was me and it was now and I was the age of trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I'd be like all over that 3D printing stuff. I'm like, that
the
is
additive
so...
manufacturing. I want to get with Teresa Melfi and have her on and talk about additive manufacturing, because I think that's
Did you see her presentation?
Like, no, once again, I was like tied up. We had student day and everything, so I missed out on a lot of the presentations. I got to sit on one panel, and then I caught Steve Snyder's presentation on the certified welding supervisor.
Yeah.
But that was the only two that I was able to meet, or two that I was able to make. We did a podcast out there with Stephanie Hoffman, Joe Young, and Scott Robbie, and then we had student day, and then we had setup and breakdown and all that. But
that was like
I think this year I'm going to go in there and cover a lot more and take a lot more of the classes, so that'd be kind of cool.
That was the coolest. I mean, here's what blew my mind. She put on that presentation. I'm like, oh my God, that is so cool. That is awesome. They're building things, robotically and welding it, not like, powder additive and with lasers and everything.
It's like weld wire.
It's weld wire, and it's amazing. And I was standing there waiting to talk to her, and somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I saw your presentation earlier. That was the best presentation." And I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me? This was amazing." I'm like, mine was like, "Hey, get your act together."
Yeah, I mean, what they're doing with 3D print, I mean, they're essentially 3D printing with steel, and it's not going to be long before that's how we're putting up buildings, and that's how we're building, everything. Cause like I went to a manufacturers conference over here in Orlando last year, year before, it doesn't matter. But I picked up this skull. This guy had all this 3D printed stuff sitting out here, and I was like, oh, like it's a plastic. I like skulls. Yeah. So I went to pick this thing up, and I was like, man, this thing's heavy. And it was probably 3 inches tall, and it weighed like 3.5 pounds. He's like, oh, yeah, that's all stainless steel. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
He goes, that's 3D printed. I was like, so you guys milled this? And he's like, no, that's 3D printed. And I was like, but what about all the detail? And he's like, it was 3D printed. Like it was sat flat, and then they just kept building layers and layers and layers and welding over here. And like it was a solid piece of stainless steel formed into a skull. Yeah. And the fact that they can, over at Lincoln, they've got a part of a backhoe. So all the hydraulic lines run on the inside of the machine. So you only need like a 4 to 6 inch piece of hydraulic hose that just connects between the knuckles. Everything else runs internal. So now your lines aren't getting smashed, crushed, ripped up. None of that stuff. Like everything's internal. So imagine what you could do with that. I want to say Amsterdam has a people walkway. Yep. And they started with one robot on one side of the river and one on the other.
I saw that.
And they
one.
met in the middle. Yeah. Like with perfect precision. And it's a 3D, and it looks like a work of art, but you can walk across it. You can probably drive across it, but I think it's just a people walkway. Yeah.
Yeah. That was incredible. And I mean, it went up in no time. If I had the opportunity, I would be all over that stuff. Hands down. That would be my number one geek. I mean, talking about, that reminds me of the, stuff in space where they're like, we'll just 3D print it and we'll have it for you in no time.
Yeah. I actually wanted to get one here for the studio just to like mess around with it in my downtime, to like, not that I ever have downtime, but like just to like start learning how to do that stuff. Cause it's not a very big transition to learn how to do that with plastics and polymers. And then just, okay, I'm going to change the filament out. Now I'm using 70S6 instead of whatever this plastic stuff is. Now I'm actually welding with it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally cool. And so, that's not even talking about lasers. That's not even talking about, like I said, there's so many cool things. And if we can just, keep moving forward as society, looking at what can we do with that kind of stuff as opposed to,
The biggest thing I think that we're going to run into is finding the bodies. We need the people. We got the bodies. We got to build the interest and show people, hey, welding's not dark, dirty, dangerous anymore. It's clean. You can do it remotely. You can work from home in 3D print in Cleveland. Like you can do all this stuff. Welding doesn't have to be a bad word anymore.
Oh, definitely.
And for a long time, I mean, that's what it was looked down upon for years. And now people are starting to realize, hey, it's actually cool to get into skilled trades. Oh, you can make a decent living in the skilled trades. Yeah. You can make good money and have good benefits and like actually enjoy waking up and going to work every day.
Yeah.
That's not a dead-end job anymore either.
Exactly.
So many different avenues.
Yeah. Well, and the unfortunate thing is that when they look up, if you look up like average price that a welder's paid, like you go onto the sites and you look at that, they're all basing it off of the guy that's just sitting there welding a trailer and welding, a little part and doing this and, over and over. Because there's thousands of people that do that, right? And that skews the what could you make as a welder? And there are so many jobs that pay way more and are way more interesting than just doing this. If I had fallen into the welding industry, not at General Motors as a repair welder working on, whatever came up that day that broke, if I just had to weld part after part again, I probably wouldn't have ended up in welding engineering because it would have been very boring.
At that point, you're just a piecework guy. I've had students come out of my program and they're like, hey, I stopped by this company yesterday and they offer me like $14 an hour. Should I take it? I'm like, no, because that's all you're going to be doing is they don't need a welder. They need somebody that can run a 3-inch weld on 1,000 parts or, the same, part of the trailer every single day. No, you signed up to be a welder. You're trained to do this, that, and the other. Let me line you up with a company that's going to start you off at like $22 an hour plus benefits. Yeah. Like not $14 an hour and the only benefit you're getting at the end of the week is a paycheck. Like let me get you into a career, not a job, because a job stands for just over broke. Yeah. Let me launch you on a path. Very similar to what you did. You kept climbing that ladder, going through different companies to find out exactly where you wanted to be, where you needed to be. You leaned on your network, and I would imagine as you transferred from one spot to another, your pay increased along with that because you're more valuable.
Most of the time, yes. There was a time when I went backwards.
Yeah, in order to go forwards. Yeah.
Yep. Just like with the R&D road, correct? We had to scrap a few months or scrap a year but see the upside and see what you were learning. And I spend a lot, like probably 4 times a year, I go and talk to different schools. Someone will say, "Hey, would you come talk to my school about what you do and what kind of careers there are and how to get there and that kind of thing." And I've got this whole presentation that I do. And I always ask them at the end, I said, "Do you want a piece of advice?" You don't want to enforce advice on people. You say, "Do you want a piece of advice?" And at least one person will say, "Sure." I said, "Okay, here's my piece of advice. If somebody says to you, 'You want to learn how to do this?' You don't go, sure. Yeah, whatever. No, you say, yes. Yes, I would love to learn how to do that.
Enthusiastically.
Yes, commit to it. Don't make it somebody that's putting themselves out there to teach you something. Even if it's something you don't think you're going to see any value in, say yes and learn from it. Because there's always going to be something that's going to tie into that later. And you can't whatever your way through life. You either say, yes, I want to learn something. Yes, I want to do more. I'm constantly studying something, learning some new thing, whether it's 3D printing, whether it's, I don't care. I'm always like, oh, cool. What is that? How can we do that? How, that's really cool. There's so much out there that's always changing, especially in the welding world. Yeah. And I love going. I love going to Fab Tech.
I'm like a kid in a candy store at Fab Tech. Like, I didn't even know that stuff existed.
Well, and, we're at the point where, it used to be you'd see like 5 new things, 6 new things that were like, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see? We're usually down to like 1 or 2 now. You know what I mean? It's like, 1 or 2 maybe new things every year, but there's always something I'm like, hey, that was really cool. Did you go see that? And, I'm always looking at, what can I use? How can I keep going with it? And it's cool. I love it.
It's a great industry. And like I tell people all the time, the more I learn about welding, the more I realize I know absolutely nothing about welding.
Right.
Yeah. Amen.
Because it's such a broad field. And like just when you start getting good at something, you start unlocking other things. Or like you move on to a different process or, different equipment or different modes of metal transfer or different code.
Oh,
and all this stuff, it's like, man, I thought I had it. And it's like, no, you're still scratching the surface.
Yeah.
That's where that fear factor comes in. You can't be scared to move on. You have to be willing to have your failures and keep on going.
I love failing.
Well, it's interesting that you say that fear factor thing, right? This is a rule that I have for myself personally. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want you to do this, or I think you should go do this, or I want to hire you to do this. If I think to myself, oh, no, I can't do that. No, I stop and I think, okay, why are you saying that? Where's that coming from? And if it's because I'm afraid of it, like, oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I make myself do it.
Yeah.
I won't let myself just not do it because I'm afraid of it, because that was what helped me make that decision to go into General Motors. That's what helped me make that decision to leave and go on to Ferris State and get my engineering degree. And, every one of those times I was afraid to go do it. But if I hadn't made myself go do it, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I would have stayed at General Motors, which coincidentally, sidebar, ended up shutting down that facility like 2 years after I left. They were gone. So, I made the right decision. But if I'd have been afraid, if I'd have just been like, oh, no, I'm comfortable. You got to get out of that box. You got to push yourself out of that box.
You have to get used to being uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get yourself used to being uncomfortable becomes comfortable.
Yeah. So I like to say satisfaction is the death of desire.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're completely satisfied with everything you're doing, like, you've got no desires to go on and do anything else. Like, I never want to be satisfied. And like I said earlier, like, I love failing because that's like the stepping stones to success.
Yep.
You have to fail. And I love failing because I learned so much from it. Then if I go out there and get it right the first time, I didn't learn anything. I might have got lucky. Now I'm cocky. No, I want to build that up. I want to build those calluses.
People say
put
that
that
about
time
you.
in.
Yeah, people say that about you.
That I'm cocky?
No. I'm just kidding.
Well, failure is not really failure. It's just a lesson.
Yeah.
It's my buddy Ryan Eubank again. He wrote it up on the board. Fail. F-A-I-L. First attempt in learning.
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's freaking brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
So I use it with all my students now. Don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah. You know that same journeyman that stuck my hand under the glove and whoosh,
Singed it.
it all went woof, a little woof fire. He would try to make any job that I was doing like fail. And I'd be like, why do you do that, man? He's like, you learn more if you fail. I'm like, I don't always have to fail. You could, don't lead me astray into failure. You're the one that led me down this path. You're supposed to be teaching me. If I decide to go and do it this way and it fails, that's a learning thing, but don't teach me the wrong way, start with. Yeah. Hard lessons.
But that's what life is all about. And like a constant state of learning.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that I think that has kept me in the welding industry forever is like, there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
Especially with like all the new people that I get to go out and meet. It's like, wow, you do that? Or that's coming? Like, same thing. Additive manufacturing. Really had no idea like that was going to be one of the next big things, or cobots. But because of the network that I've, established and people that I get to talk to, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. How do I learn more about that?
Well, and you picked the right person, Teresa Melfi. She's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had her on the podcast briefly for the to talk about the Weld Summit last year. But I want to have her on as like, let's talk about additive manufacturing because I don't know anything about it. So fill me in.
Well, put on your big boy pants that day because she's one of those people that she's at 10,000 feet sometimes. You know what I mean? She's so smart. She's so smart.
So I got to bring you back in to like translate for me.
Maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you need a, what did she just say?
Yeah.
She said blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I'll be that person for you.
Well, cool. I'll have to keep you on speed dial.
Hey, Lori, I need to phone a friend.
Yeah.
Let me play this back for you. I have no idea where we were going with this conversation. No, she really is. She's another great person that's always willing to help so many people in the welding industry. That's just it. I don't know of any other industry that is like, please take my knowledge, let me teach you, than the welding industry. Seriously. I mean, you gotta be as dumb as a box of rocks and just a really, I don't know what kind of person to not like move forward in the welding industry. I mean, there's so many people that want to help you and that really want to, pass that knowledge on and hope you do something with it and continue to grow. And you can just keep calling and calling and calling, going, hey, I ran into this. Hey, I ran into that. What do you think? What should I do? They're just always willing to help. They're just great people.
Yeah.
I love the welding industry.
I asked Scott that one time.
Yeah.
We were riding around Houston and I was like, dude, like, why are you doing all this for me? Like, you come down here, like, put me up in your house and, you're sharing all your connections and information and stuff with me and you become like a huge resource and mentor. Like, why me? That's just what we do, Han.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
He's my brother from another mother.
That's the same thing that I do. Like, people reach out on Instagram all the time or, Facebook or email, and they're like, hey, I'm getting ready to do this or that, and I give them free information. Why? Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. And I mean, that's what I've learned from all my mentors. They pass information on to me. I pass it off to the next generation. It's what we do.
Yeah. Well, and, the type of people that want to hoard information and set themselves out there, they're not the ones you're really going to learn anything from anyway. No. There's so many discoveries, so many advances. It's a team of people that had to move it forward, and just so many different avenues of something that played into whatever it is they were discovering. And if they can't work with people, then they probably didn't last long in the welding industry. You can't build anything on your own in the welding industry.
No, it's a group effort.
It really is. Yeah. And again, it's a small world. It's a very small welding world. So it's just, you want to make sure that you keep your integrity, you keep pushing it forward, and keep sharing. We have to, or we're going to be that third world country. Yeah. So we're not going to have any knowledge left.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, Lori, Bryson, it's been an honor, having you guys come out here to the studio and chat with me. I really appreciate y'all making the drive. I know it's not close, but thank you so much for coming out here and, sharing, your experience with the listeners.
Oh. Yeah, man, we appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a really enjoyable time. A little nervous about doing it. I was like, what are we going to talk about? So
welding.
Welding. We didn't have any trouble. So.
No, we keep it simple around here.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having us. It was a great honor. So thanks.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Arc Junkies Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Lori Kuiper and Bryson Ward from Ready Arc. If you want to learn more about Ready Arc and their welding equipment rental and lease services, be sure to check out their website, ReadyArc.com. And while you're on the web, don't forget to check out all of our supporters. Without them, this show would not be possible. Be sure to tune in next week where I chat with Bill Newell, Scott Wachowski, and Mike Miller about the next big thing in our industry, hydrogen transportation. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.